To millions of listeners, my wife was a relationship guru, the host of a top-rated podcast about love and honesty. To me, she was the woman having a secret affair and using her platform to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. She painted me as the villain in our story, turning our private pain into public entertainment for her fans. She thought she controlled the narrative. She had no idea I was recording my own episode. This is the story of how I used her own medium to expose the truth and bring her empire of lies crashing down. You have to listen to the whole story to hear the final shocking episode that changed everything. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch! The first lie always sounds the most convincing, especially when it's spoken in the voice you fell in love with. Every Tuesday morning, like a million other people, I would listen to my wife's voice. It was a ritual. I'd pour my coffee, sit at our kitchen island in our quiet suburb outside of Portland, Oregon, and listen to Clara host "Made Honest Heart," the podcast that had made her a star. Her voice, a warm and reassuring alto, would pour from the speakers, dissecting the complexities of modern love with what sounded like profound wisdom. "You have to build your relationship on a foundation of radical transparency," she'd say, her tone intimate, as if she were confiding in each listener personally, because secrecy is a cancer. It metastasizes in the dark. I almost choked on my coffee. For the last 6 months our home had been filled with darkness. A darkness so thick I felt like I was wading through it just to get to the next day. We were the poster couple for Portland's progressive dream. Leo and Clara, the architect and the relationship guru. We'd met at a farmer's market, had our first date at a microbrewery, and got married under a canopy of Douglas firs. Our life from the outside looked like an Instagram filter come to life. And for a long time it was. But then, things started to change. It wasn't one big event. It was 1,000 tiny, almost imperceptible shifts. It was the way her phone was suddenly always angled away from me. It was the late-night writing sessions for her book proposal that required her to go to a coffee shop 2 towns over. It was the sudden, passionate interest in a new genre of music she'd always claimed to hate. Little things. So little that if you mentioned them, you'd sound insane, paranoid, and God, she was an expert at making me feel paranoid. "Leo, honey, you seem so on edge lately," she'd say, her brow furrowed with that practiced therapeutic concern she used on her show. "Is everything okay at work? You know you can talk to me?" The gaslighting was so smooth, so professional, I almost believed it myself. I started questioning my own sanity. Maybe I was just stressed. Maybe I was inventing problems where there were none. She was Clara Sterling, the woman who taught people how to love better. Who was I to question her? This feeling, this constant state of confusion and self-doubt, was my new normal. I felt like a ghost in my own home, orbiting a woman who was becoming a stranger. The breaking point came in the form of a watch, a beautiful vintage Omega Speedmaster. I'd seen it in the window of a shop downtown months ago and mentioned, just once, how much I loved it. For my 34th birthday, Clara surprised me with it. She made a whole production of it, even filming the moment for her social media. "Investing in the things your partner truly values," she'd captioned the post. I was floored. It was the most thoughtful, extravagant gift I'd ever received. It felt like a sign. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe everything was okay. I wore it every single day. It was a totem against my own nagging fear. A month later, I was cleaning out the glove compartment of her car, looking for a tire gauge when I found it. A receipt from that same vintage watch shop, tucked into an old insurance slip. I pulled it out, my hands starting to tremble. It wasn't a receipt for my watch, it was a receipt for a second one. A women's Cartier tank purchased on the same day as my Omega. The total was astronomical. There was no way we could have afforded both. I stared at the slip of paper, the sterile black ink spelling out a truth my heart refused to accept. That night, I waited until she came home from another one of her late meetings. I was sitting at that same kitchen island, the receipt placed squarely in the middle, my Omega next to it. She walked in, humming, and froze when she saw my face. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She glanced at the receipt, and for a fleeting millisecond-long moment I saw it. Pure, unadulterated panic. Then the mask of the therapist's wife snapped back into place. She let out a small, dismissive laugh. "Oh, that. Gosh, you found my secret," she said, her tone light and teasing. It was a gift from my agent Bethany for landing the book deal. I used my advance. I was going to tell you, but I wanted it to be a surprise for her. It was a brilliant lie. Plausible. Quick. It almost worked. But my analytical architect's brain, the one that sees structural flaws, kicked in. The book advance hasn't cleared yet, Clara, I said, my voice flat. I saw the email from the publisher. It's net 90 days. We don't have that money, so where did it come from? The silence was deafening. The air crackled. She just stared at me, her mind clearly racing, searching for the next exit ramp. I can't believe you, she finally said, her voice turning sharp, wounded. You went through my car. What is wrong with you, Leo? This is what I'm talking about. This paranoia, this jealousy. You're smothering me. You take one beautiful, selfless thing I did for you, and you twist it into this ugly accusation. You know what? I'm not going to dignify this. I'm going to bed. And just like that, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the kitchen with 2 watches and a truth that was beginning to feel horrifyingly real. She hadn't just lied. She had made my discovery of her lie an indictment of my character. It was my fault for looking. My fault for questioning. The cognitive dissonance was so intense it made me physically nauseous. I loved this woman, the woman who made me laugh and held me when I was sick. But that woman was starting to feel like a character she played, and the real Clara was someone I didn't know at all. Someone cold and frighteningly skilled at manipulation. The next few weeks were a descent into a private hell. I started digging. I became a detective in my own marriage. It felt shameful, like a betrayal in itself, but I couldn't stop. I needed proof. I needed to know I wasn't going crazy. I checked our credit card statements online. Hidden in plain sight were charges I'd never noticed. Dinners for 2 at expensive restaurants I'd never been to. A recurring charge for a boutique hotel downtown, the Hawthorne, classified under business expenses. Every Tuesday, her podcast would air, and it became a form of psychological torture. One week, the theme was navigating a partner's insecurity. She spoke with deep manufactured empathy about how hard it is when the person you love can't see your truth, because they're projecting their own fears onto the relationship. She was talking about me. She was workshopping our arguments, polishing her lies, and broadcasting them to 1 million people as wisdom. She was turning my pain into content. I felt trapped, utterly, completely trapped. This was the trauma bond I'd read about but never understood. Every time I thought about leaving, a wave of memories of the good Clara would wash over me, making me second-guess everything. Maybe she was right. Maybe if I were just a better husband, more trusting, more supportive, she wouldn't need to lie. It was a toxic, codependent cycle, and I was drowning in it. The final piece of the puzzle, the one that would shatter everything, came from an unlikely source. Our health insurance EOBs. I was organizing our tax documents when I saw it. A series of claims for marriage counseling. We had gone to a therapist, a Dr. Alistair Finch, for a few months last year when things first started to feel strained. But the claims hadn't stopped. In fact, there was a claim for every single week for the past 4 months. Billed as couples therapy. I had not been to therapy in 4 months. My blood ran cold. I pulled up the credit card statement again, cross-referencing the dates. The charges at the Hawthorne Hotel. They lined up perfectly. Every Tuesday afternoon, a charge for couples therapy, Dr. Finch. And an hour later, a charge for the Hawthorne. The picture that snapped into focus in my mind was so grotesque, so profoundly depraved, that I had to sit down. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the papers. She wasn't just having an affair. She was using our shared medical insurance to pay for her weekly trysts. She was weaponizing the very concept of healing our marriage as a cover for destroying it. And the man paying for her secret hotel rooms, the man who owned the other half of that Cartier watch, the man who was listening to all my deepest fears and insecurities and using them against me, was our marriage counselor. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. There's a silence that comes after your world breaks. It's not a peaceful silence. It's a roaring, high-pitched vacuum where all the sounds of your normal life used to be. For 2 days I existed in that vacuum. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the couch in my home office, staring at the wall. The insurance statements and credit card bills spread out on the floor like the debris from a plane crash. My plane crash. The old Leo, the one who lived in a state of codependent hope, would have confronted her. He would have screamed, cried, and begged for an explanation, giving her yet another opportunity to spin a new reality, to make him the crazy one. But that Leo had died in the wreckage. The man who was left was someone else, someone cold, someone methodical, someone who finally understood that you can't reason with a fire. You can only let it burn out or starve it of oxygen. That weekend, while Clara was away at a podcast summit in Seattle, a trip I now knew was a romantic getaway with Dr. Finch, I began to form my boundaries. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I packed a bag, not for her, for me. I systematically went through the house and gathered every piece of evidence. I photographed the receipts. I downloaded the bank statements. I took screenshots of the insurance claims. I created a file on a thumb drive, a meticulous archive of my own betrayal. Then, I drove to a small furnished apartment I'd rented online, and I didn't look back. I sent her a single text message: "I know everything, Clara. About Alistair. About the hotel. I've moved out. A lawyer will be in contact." Her response was a frantic flurry of calls and texts. At first they were filled with feigned shock and confusion. Then, when I didn't answer, they morphed into rage. How dare I? How could I be so dramatic? So impulsive? She was a victim in all of this, she claimed. Alistair had been inappropriate. He had taken advantage of her during a vulnerable time. She was trying to protect me from the truth. It was her masterpiece of narcissism. Even in the face of irrefutable proof, she was incapable of taking responsibility. She was the star of her own tragedy, and everyone else was just a supporting character, responsible for her pain. I blocked her number. The silence was a relief, but it didn't last long. The next Tuesday, a new episode of The Honest Heart dropped. I listened to it with a sense of clinical detachment. The episode was titled "When Love Becomes a Cage." Sometimes her voice began, thick with performative emotion. You can love someone so much that you lose yourself. And sometimes that person's love can become possessive, controlling. They check your receipts. They track your movements. They create a narrative of infidelity because they can't handle your success. They build a cage of paranoia around you, and for the sake of your own mental health, your only choice is to fly free. I felt my blood turn to ice. She was doing it. She was taking our private implosion and turning it into a public parable of her empowerment. She was preemptively poisoning the well, painting me as an unhinged, abusive husband to her million-strong army of fans. My phone started buzzing with notifications. Friends, even some family members, were texting me. "Leo, what is going on? I heard Clara's new episode. Are you okay?" But the tone wasn't one of concern for me, it was concern for her. The narrative was set. I was the villain. That was when I knew I couldn't just walk away. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. This was about my reputation, my sanity, my truth. She had used her platform to destroy me. I would use it to rebuild myself. I hired a lawyer who specialized in high-conflict divorces and media personalities. I also filed a formal complaint against Dr. Alistair Finch with the state licensing board, submitting my entire file of evidence. But that wasn't enough. The legal system was slow. The court of public opinion was not. My revenge couldn't be a shouting match. It had to be precise. It had to be undeniable. It had to be in her language. So, I decided to make my own podcast, a single episode, a rebuttal. My honest heart, if you will. I spent a month preparing. I bought a professional microphone. I wrote a script, not of anger, but of facts. I structured it just like her show. A calm confessional opening, a central narrative, and supporting evidence. My episode was titled, "The Other Side of the Story." I started by playing a clip from her show, the one where she talks about radical transparency. "That was my wife, Clara Sterling," my voice began, steady and clear. "For the last 6 months, I have been the silent subject of her podcast. I have been the insecure partner, the paranoid husband. Today I would like to offer a different perspective. A perspective supported by receipts, hotel folios, and insurance documents. And then, I just told the story. Calmly, factually, calmly. Factually. I didn't editorialize. I didn't name call. I just presented the evidence. I described finding the watch receipt. I read the dates and amounts from the credit card statements. I walked the listener through the insurance claims, explaining how couples therapy was used to defraud our insurance company and cover up an affair with her therapist. I even included short, embedded audio clips of her voicemails, the ones where she was frantically trying to spin new lies after I left. The juxtaposition of her public wisdom and her private panicked dishonesty was damning. My final line was simple: secrecy is a cancer, it metastasizes in the dark. My wife was right about that. I just thought you all deserved to see the light. I didn't have a platform, but I had a strategy. The night before her next episode was scheduled to drop, I uploaded my single episode podcast to every major platform. Then I sent the link to every major media outlet in Portland, every gossip blogger who covered the influencer scene, and most importantly to the fan-run Facebook and Reddit groups for the honest heart. The reaction was nuclear. By morning my story was everywhere. The other side off the story was trending. The fans who had deified her felt profoundly betrayed. They had listened to her preach honesty while she was living the ultimate lie. They had sympathized with her struggle against a toxic husband, only to find out he was the one being systematically gaslit. Clara's world crumbled in a matter of hours. Her sponsors pulled their advertising. Her network dropped her podcast. The state licensing board fast-tracked their investigation into Dr. Finch, and he was suspended immediately, his career in ruins. She tried to release a statement, calling my episode a gross violation of privacy and a campaign of harassment. But it was too late. The receipts were out. No one believed her. Our divorce was swift and quiet. Her leverage was gone. I walked away with my dignity, my half of our assets, and my name cleared. It's been a year now. The silence in my life is different. It's a peaceful, clean silence. I moved to a small house on the coast, where the only thing I listen to in the morning is the sound of the ocean. I don't know what happened to Clara, and I don't care to know. I reclaimed my narrative, not by screaming louder but by speaking the truth more clearly. She built an empire on a lie, and I brought it down with a single honest story, my story. And that is a foundation that no one can ever take away from me.